All right, I'll give you a couple more minutes to see how far you can make it before I kind of run through the answer. So as you kind of start to, as far as you can, what's a good starting point on these problems? What's like a good first step, you think? Who's got it for me? Kind of always go with it. Yes. Yeah, so we make our 2 Punnett squares, right? And what are those? What? I guess that's really small Punnett square. What does each one have in there? I guess, like, how do we separate these out into our Punnett squares? Yep, so good. So we've got the B's in one of them, right? I'll get out of the way here because I can have it. So you put the B's in one of them, because one of them will be your hair color, right, which is the B allele. And you have your E's in the other one, okay? Does it matter which parent's parent one, so the one on the top and the one on the side? It does not. No, however you write it is okay as long as you cross them correctly. One little tip when you write the heterozygous genotypes, I can't remember if I said this in this class, is you always write the capital letter first. That's just a good rule of thumb, just to make sure that you do that. So once you've got those Punnett squares set up, which are relatively close to what you're used to doing, yeah, I'll kind of position that a little bit better so you can see it. Okay. So once you've got both these Punnett squares, then you kind of go through, and since we're only looking at the phenotypes, we're looking at the different phenotypes we have here. So what are all of these? Because they're all the same genotype, right? So what are they? Are they all black or are they all brown here? Yeah, they are all black, right? So I like to write the fraction, okay, which is a 4 out of 4. You can also write that equals 1 if you divide those, which is 100%, okay? And what percent is long and what percent is floppy ears?
50.
Yeah, so they're each 50%, right? So 2 out of 4, which is 0.5, which is 50%. I'll kind of get out of the way here once I do it. So 2 out of 4, same thing, okay? Sweet. So we know 4 out of 4, 2 out of 4, 2 out of 4. I'd always start with this. I'd always write all of your percents down, okay? So now we can go ahead and start combining them. And what do we have to do with each of those percents? So percent black is 4 out of 4. Long is 2 out of 4. What do we have to do with those 2%? Yep, multiply them, right? So we multiply them together because, okay. So 4 out of 4. When we cross them and multiply, I should have finished my thought on that. Okay. We then multiply the tops, multiply the bottoms. Crossed, which is 4 times 2 is 8. 16. Do the same thing with this one. So black percent, 4 to 4. Okay. These are 0%. 0 out of our 4 are brown. Okay. I can still write it out just to show my work on that. But it's 0. So now if I was to do a ratio, okay, you always, since all of our denominators will be the same, which is 16, you can just write, so that's 8, 8, 0, 0, so that's a ratio. Okay?
Does it matter what order?
It doesn't. I will say that it doesn't for the ratio. I won't count it off, but I'd like you to go down the order that you have those written out, but the order does not matter as long as you get the numbers right. Yep. So I'll kind of slide over here so you can see the ratio. So we got 8 from here, 8 from here, 0 from there, 0 from there. And that works because we had them all as fractions. Now, I did ask for percents on this one, so you do still have to turn these into percents. You have to tell me that that's 50%, that one's 50%, that one's 0%, that one's 0%, okay? The fractions are nice, though, because it helps us get a nice clean ratio really easily. If you did the percents, you could do a 50 to 50 to 0 to 0 and then simplify that down. You could simplify it to this. Okay, that's right, too. Okay, questions on that? Do you want to see? I'll let you write down if you're writing down the answer to that. You want to see another one? Or are you good on those? All right, cool. So the next thing we're going to be doing, our next types of problems, which we're going to be doing practice problems today on, are pedigrees. I think you've seen these before, but if you haven't, that's okay because I'm going to kind of introduce them. I like the videos because you can reference back to them throughout. So I'll probably we won't play the whole thing, but we will we'll introduce what pedigrees are. And so pedigrees are basically like, I don't know, have you ever seen like a family tree before?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. And I didn't play this yesterday though, or on Monday, did I? No. Okay. So you've seen like a family tree. Pedigrees are kind of like a fancy family tree, except they're tracking one specific trait, right? So you can pick something like this one's going to talk about hanging earlobes, right? So you can track the trait of hanging earlobes through a family tree or something like that, okay? So we're going to be working with pedigrees today. You're going to be completing some of them, but this is kind of the intro conceptual side of it. And then, no. I mean, I haven't started it yet, but thanks for letting me know. Oh, yeah, I know. Your favorite type. They're okay. They're pretty good. I think they're.
So I have a really awesome picture for you. Here it is. Oh, it might look like circles and squares to you, but make no mistake, this is no ordinary picture. This is a pedigree. A pedigree is like a family tree. It can show information about an inherited trait passed across generations. And this one is actually a small pedigree of us. Well, our human forms. See, that's me, my sister, my mom, my dad. I'm not arbitrarily picking random shapes to represent us either. In a pedigree, the circles represent females, squares represent males. One way you can remember that is the letter C for circle comes before the letter S for square in the alphabet. Alphabetically, the letter F for female comes before the letter M for male. I've got to think about letters of the alphabet, though. I realize that might not work for everyone. So if we take a look at this pedigree, these Roman numerals represent generations. There's 2 generations here. This between my parents is called a marriage line. This line here connects parents to children, so you could see there are 2 children from this marriage. Now you may wonder, why are some of these shapes shaded? What does that mean? Well, the shaded shapes represent a trait that is being tracked in the pedigree. Here are 2 important facts about the particular trait I am choosing to track. Fact number 1 about this trait being tracked is that it's recessive. Recall that in typical Mendelian inheritance, dominant alleles, if present, will lead to the expression of dominant traits. Recessive alleles only are expressed when the dominant allele is not present. Now, fact number 2 about this trait is that it is an autosomal recessive trait. Just a reminder that autosomal means a chromosome that is not a sex chromosome. In human body cells, there are 46 chromosomes. The first 44, 22 pairs, are autosomes. The last 2, 1 pair, are sex chromosomes. So this trait is not sex-linked since it is autosomal, and that means it does not need to be written as coefficients on the sex chromosomes. So what is the trait we're tracking? Attached earlobes. Yes, you might not realize it, but look around and you'll see that humans, they have free or attached earlobes. Although we want to point out that there may be more than just these two categories for earlobes. And while this example is used often in basic genetics, there's probably more to this than just one simple gene. For our example, let's assume a simple gene trait, and that free earlobes is dominant, meaning at least one dominant allele must be around. Attached earlobes is recessive, showing when no dominant allele is present. So if we were to put the genotypes next to each of these shapes, what would they be? Well, the shaded ones would be easy, because we just mentioned that attached earlobes is the trait we're tracking, and it's an autosomal recessive trait. So if we use the letter E, then these shaded shapes must be lowercase e. Any capital dominant letter, and the individual would have to have free earlobes and not be shaded. So let's look at individual 2 in the first generation. That's our father. He's not shaded, so he can't be little e. What about big E? Well, there's a problem. See his children? Us? Each child must get an allele from each parent. So if I received a little e from my mom, then I had to get the other little e from my dad. Therefore, he can't be big E, or he'd have no little e to give. His genotype must be the heterozygote genotype, big E, little e. He's what we call a carrier, though. He still has a phenotype of free earlobes because of that one capital, but he carries the lowercase allele. Now, that's just one tiny pedigree. Let's look at a big family reunion. Well, an imaginary one, because I have to confess I don't really know whether our relatives have free or attached earlobes. I thought about sending a survey to them, but it just felt a little awkward. So here we go. Big, giant, imaginary family of relatives. Okay, just to make sure you understand this, how many siblings does my dad have? Well, look, here's my dad in generation 2, number 4. He has 3 siblings, all brothers, right here. What is the phenotype of my paternal grandfather? Well, look, here's my dad. Here's my dad's dad. That would be my paternal grandfather. And because his square is shaded, that means his phenotype is attached earlobes. Okay, so let's go ahead and label all these shaded shapes with the genotype little e, since we know that's the trait we're tracking. Now take a look at generation 1, individual 1. That would be my paternal grandmother. What's her genotype? We know it's not little e, or her shape would be shaded. But if we went with big E, could that still work? Yes, all the offspring could get a big E from her and a little e from my grandfather. But what about big E? Would that work too? Yes, because the children could still get a big E from her and a little e from my grandfather. It may be less of a probability, but it's possible, and therefore we must list both, that she is a big E or big E, because we don't know. All the offspring of my paternal grandparents, though, they're going to have to be big E. Remember, they have to get an allele from each parent, and that means they're going to have to pick up that little e from my grandfather. They will be heterozygotes, and that's the only option here. Pause this video and try to solve the right side of this pedigree now. Ta-da! Imaginary family done. So how'd you do? Well, here are some of the tricky ones. Did you see that generation 1, individual 4, has to be a carrier only? Because if not, then the shaded individual children would not be able to get the little e that they have, because they have to get a little e from both parents. How about individual 9? This female married in, but that's not the reason that she can be either big E or big E. If you look at the children, they aren't shaded. So while they will have to get a little e from number 8, as that's all number 8 can give, the other capital letter can be obtained from number 9 regardless of whether she's big E or big E. Remember,
Okay, make sure it's good. Okay, perfect. So, some terms, things like that. When we see a square, okay, what is that? What is a square?
Male.
That is a male. Good. Okay, so squares are. Let me make sure that looks good. So you'll write down this for now, but I'll just. So you'll write down. So squares are males. Okay, what is non-shaded or white versus shaded? Right? It's not always white. Sometimes it's like a gray color, but all the ones I'll give you, it'll be white and Shaded. Yep. So what are the shaded ones in our example? Those. Which one's dominant?
Your microphone's
Which one? What?
muted.
Yeah, this one is. Sorry. This one isn't. I've got this one on. It's kind of an interesting. I've got this one on and this one's off. Thanks, though. Yeah, I've tried a couple different things with that. So, what are these? Are they dominant or recessive?
Dominant.
This one's dominant. Yep, good. So this one would be the dominant. Okay, so the male dominant one. Okay, this would be the female dominant. So this is what you'll write down. Okay. So what's this one? Yep, that's recessive, right? So shaded is recessive. Okay. And then the shaded one, so this is a female that is recessive. For the first couple problems that we do, the actual, whether it's male or female, doesn't matter. Okay. The ones for Monday absolutely will, because they are what we call X-linked or sex-linked traits, meaning that they are on the actual X and Y chromosomes. Okay. So the genotypes you can use to get dominant in a standard complete genetics problem are what? What are our two genotypes that can lead to dominant characteristics? Say we were working with B alleles. Yep, so big B, little b is one. And yep, two big B's. Okay, so whenever we have these in pedigree, it could be this one. Okay, it could be our heterozygous, it could be our homozygous dominant, or it is possible in that one scenario that they were talking about that we don't know. Okay, we'll get this out of here. Meaning it could be either one. We don't know, right? Meaning both are possible offsprings. That's the one that we often forget. You can write it like this. You can write it as a dash. You can write it as a question mark. Okay. Females are the same. Recessive ones, do we have much of a choice? No, it's got to be little b, right? Okay. So that's our recessive genotypes whenever we do. So, go ahead.
Is that big B slash big B?
Yeah, so this one is an example. In the video, they were talking about this individual, okay? This individual, we didn't know their genotype, but we did know that they crossed with a recessive individual and they ended up getting two heterozygous offspring, right? So the question are these individuals, is it capital E, lowercase e, or could it be both, right? So we did a Punnett square for each possibility. We did a Punnett square for the capital E scenario, and we got all heterozygotes, okay? We did a capital E, lowercase e, and we still have a possibility of getting these offspring, okay? So in that case, we have to say it could be either one, okay? It could be either one. And you can write that in a variety of ways. I personally like that way the best. You could write a question mark if you wanted to, like capital B question mark. I'll kind of shut this front light off so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Yeah, this one right here. Okay, so that individual could be either one. They would be an example of this. Okay, meaning you don't know. You do have to tell me if you don't know on the pedigree examples. Okay. Now we get to do some pedigree. Most folks don't find these too bad. Honestly, they're kind of an offshoot application of Punnett square genetics that we learned. So I'll go through one example, then I'll probably turn to Luke. All right, so on that one, and these will just be a PDF, virtual folks. So this right here is what we're looking at. You don't have to do any submission on it, this virtual folks or in person, because you won't have to do it. So that first one there, Okay, we'll go ahead and kind of go through that one as an example. It's one of the simpler ones, but the genotype we're working with is the B alleles, okay, and the shaded individuals are the lowercase b, lowercase b. So they're the ones that are recessive, okay? So where do you think is a good starting point? Which genotypes are really easy to probably tell right away which ones are which? What was that?
The 1, 2 on the top. Yeah, those two.
Yeah, these might not be a bad starting point as long as I know one of them's definitely a good starting point. One of them's pretty easy. All these shaded ones, and I'll see if it shows up on the other one too, otherwise I'm gonna have to write it in on both of these. All of these shaded ones are a pretty good starting point because we know right away that they are all lowercase b, lowercase b. And of course that doesn't show up in the version. So I'll fix it here. Actually, I'll just make it not share. Yeah, that'll work. Okay. So I'll throw in this one too. So all the shaded ones are always a good first step, right, to go through. And all those are lowercase b's. The ones that are tricky are the ones that are the dominant, okay? So when one is dominant, you will look at it and you have to ask yourself, does it have a recessive kid or parent? We don't have any parent data on this initial one, right? This is like the first generation. Do we have a recessive kid? We do, right? If we have a recessive kid, that means we have to have that recessive allele there, okay? The reason why is if we did a Punnett square, you can do a Punnett square on these, you can probably do them in your head, but if you do, for the more complicated examples, you probably have to do some sort of a Punnett square to check your answers. Okay, we can get two recessive offspring, so this one is possible, okay? But if we did capital B, we wouldn't be able to get that, okay? This one, recessive kid or parent. Do we have any parent data on this one, this square? We don't, right? That one married into the family, okay? But we do know what its kid is, right? Its kid is recessive. This is kind of annoying to have to bounce back and forth. That's okay. Okay, its kid's recessive, so we know that it is that. Even though we don't have any parent data, we've got this. Do we know anything about this one? Well, if we look, I actually drew a cross of our two parents. Can it be capital B, based off those possible offspring? No, right? It has to be capital B, lowercase b. Same with this one. Because these two are kids of that one as well. These two. Okay? Any questions on that? All right. Before we do that, I think while I've got you all here, I'll probably turn you loose for the rest of class, or at least until about the last 10 minutes. But there's one more thing. I'm going to show you the blood typing ones because we're also going to do blood typing Pedigree, which are a little bit more involved. Okay. Not by much. Same idea. Oh, I am presenting. This is weird. So, how does that show me the whole screen? There we go. Okay, so on these problems, these are blood typing ones. This will be the last thing you do today. Same type of idea with the pedigrees, except now we're working with ones with blood typing. And actually, these are a little bit easier of pedigrees. These are really accurate because there's only 4 possibilities, so you can easily do a pedigree with your blood type. But the key here indicates it's color coded. So for example, this one is type B. I replaced the letter 1 with type B. All these other ones, that'd be like individual 1, but it's type B blood, and what you're entering is the genotype, right? So type A has a possibility of having AA or AO genotype. Type B has a possibility of BB or BO. Just like before, we can also have a question mark, meaning A question mark We don't know, or you could write both of them on there, okay, because it could be either one. AB, though, just has one genotype, and type O just has one genotype. So what is an easy starting point for these pedigrees? Which ones are easy? Oops. Easier, I should say. They would be the ones that we don't have to debate what the genotype is. So every time you see like a black one that's type O, you can just write OO in there, okay? So those are a good starting point. I like to start with the O's because those are never going to, there's no like decision to be made with those. They're just OO, okay? The second one is also the purple ones, okay, the type ABs, because those also don't have any, they have to be AB, okay? So after you have those filled out, then you've got some useful information. You can start to figure out like type B and type A, okay? If we have an O offspring, just like the recessive, okay, or an O parent, you probably have to have an O allele in your parents, okay? And I'll show you why. Because when we do a Punnett square between those top two parents, so that B1's BO and that A1's AO, I know it's kind of hard to see. Sorry, the font's really small. But I wrote BO and AO. And the reason why is because if we do a Punnett square on these, and we cross BO with AO, a possible offspring, one of them is OO, okay? Now, if I had something else, if I had one of those be like BB, which is the other option for them, sorry, just doing it just to prove a point, though, so it'll be okay. That OO isn't possible. It doesn't show up anymore. Okay, so both of those have to be AO. Okay, did I lose anybody there? Or are we okay on that? Okay. This one, do we have an O parent or kid? We do, right? We have a kid, so that one has to be BO, right? This one, do we have an O parent or kid?
Yeah.
Yes. So that one's got to be that one. You can do the Punnett squares with them too. This would be one where I'd probably do the Punnett squares for number 3 because I know it's a type A individual, but I'm not sure which type A individual it is, right? Could it be AA, AO, or both of them? So in this case, I'd probably do a Punnett square with both type A's to check and see, okay? So I'll go ahead and do that, and I'll shut the screen sharing off so the virtual folks can see it. I don't know if I want to erase that just yet, so I'll put it over here. It's weird to see like this. Okay, so we'll try both of them, and we'll see if they're both possible. We'll try AA first. AB. Yep, that one's possible. Okay. And this one's also possible. Now, this one only has a 25% chance of giving me AB, whereas this one's 50%, but you still have to write that it could be either one of them, okay? So in this case, I would say it could be either one of those two. I write A or A. Let me write a question mark. Okay, so that's how the first one's done. I've got that in there, so when you click on it, you'll have 3 more examples of those. Questions? All right, so go ahead and team up with your usual partners and work through those paper problems, okay? And then on Canvas, I've got this one, okay, due April 4th. And this one, but you can get them both done today. No problem. Okay. This one is graded. You do get another attempt, but give the first attempt like an actual try, right? So you don't just see the answers, actually give it a try. You can retake it if you miss a couple, right? To make sure, I want to make sure everybody's got pedigrees down by the time you leave. Sound good? Questions? All right. Go ahead and you're off. Camden, if you don't have any questions, you can bounce out. Sounds good? Make sure you get those two done.
Guys.